The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of my garage. 7:30 on a Friday night, and I was still under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's ancient Honda Civic, trying to coax another year of life out of her dying transmission. The fluorescent light above me flickered like a dying heartbeat, casting harsh shadows across the cluttered workspace that had become my refuge from the world. My phone buzzed against the metal workbench. Michelle's name lit up the screen. Guess what? Just got married to Jason from accounting in Vegas. Don't be mad. It felt right. I stared at the words until they blurred. Jason. That smug little weasel from her law firm who always shook my hand too hard at company parties, like he was proving something. The same Jason who'd been texting my wife at all hours about case files and late meetings. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. Instead, something cold and methodical settled in my chest like ice water. I didn't reply. I didn't call. I didn't beg or rage or throw my phone against the wall like some pathetic cliche. Instead, I wiped my hands clean on an old shop rag and walked into the house. The living room felt different now, like I was seeing it through new eyes. 7 years of marriage scattered across every surface, wedding photos on the mantel, Michelle's law books stacked on the coffee table, her reading glasses folded neatly beside yesterday's newspaper. All of it suddenly felt like evidence of a crime scene. I picked up the landline and dialed the first number from memory. Chase Credit Services, this is Amanda. How can I help you? I need to cancel a card. Account holder Jack Forrester. I rattled off the numbers, the security codes, the answers to questions I'd helped her set up years ago when we still trusted each other with everything. I'm sorry, sir, but only the primary account holder can. She's deceased, I lied smoothly. I'm her husband. I can fax you the death certificate Monday, but I need the card frozen tonight. There's been fraudulent activity. 20 minutes later, all 3 of her credit cards were blocked. The joint checking account took another 10 minutes, a simple transfer to my personal account. Perfectly legal since my name was on everything. Michelle had always been too busy with her career to handle the boring financial details. The locksmith arrived at 11:15, a grizzled old-timer named Pete who didn't ask questions when you paid cash for emergency service. He worked efficiently in the porch light, his tools clicking and scraping as he replaced every lock on the house. Front door, back door, garage, even the deadbolt on my workshop. Divorce? He asked, not looking up from his work. Something like that. Been there. Cost me a fortune, but worth every penny. He handed me a set of shiny new keys. These are the only copies. You want my advice? Change your passwords too. Email, bank accounts, everything. They always know more than you think. By midnight, Jack Forrester was effectively locked out of her own life. I went to bed and slept better than I had in months. The doorbell started ringing at 7 a.m. sharp, insistent and angry. I pulled on yesterday's jeans and stumbled to the front door, expecting to see Michelle standing there with her suitcases and her tail between her legs. Instead, 2 police officers filled my doorway. The older one, a thick-set man with tired eyes, spoke first. Jack Forrester, we need to speak with you about a domestic dispute. I'm confused. What dispute? Your wife filed a report claiming you locked her out of the house and stole money from your joint accounts. The younger officer consulted his notepad. She says she arrived home at 3 a.m. and couldn't get in. I blinked, processing this. She's supposed to be in Las Vegas. She flew back early. Says you changed the locks while she was away. I pulled out my phone and showed them the text message. Both officers read it twice, the older one raising his eyebrows. So she texted you that she married someone else and you changed the locks? I canceled her credit cards too. Wouldn't you? The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. Sir, technically what she did in Vegas constitutes bigamy, which is a felony. But what you did, locking her out of her legal residence and freezing her access to funds, that's illegal too. She left me for another man. We understand your frustration, the older officer said. But the law is the law. This house is in both your names, correct? You can't unilaterally lock out a legal resident. You need a court order. She's claiming financial abuse, the younger one added. Cutting off someone's access to funds during a domestic dispute is a serious charge. She married another man, I repeated, hearing my voice crack slightly. Look, we get it, but bigamy and a legal lockout are 2 separate issues. We can take a report about the Vegas marriage, but right now you need to let her back into the house. I called my lawyer from the kitchen phone while the officers waited on my porch. David Martinez had handled my business contracts for years, and he gave it to me straight. Jack, even though she committed bigamy, you violated tenant rights. Legally, she's right. You have to let her back in. This is insane. I know, but we'll file for divorce Monday morning, and the bigamy charge will work in your favor. Just don't make things worse by getting arrested for illegal lockout. When I opened the front door again, Michelle was standing behind the officers with Jason at her side. She looked smaller than I remembered, her usually perfect hair disheveled from the flight, her business suit wrinkled, but her eyes held that familiar spark of righteous indignation that had won her so many cases. "I told you this would happen," she said to the officers, then looked at me. "Really, Jack? Locking me out of my own house." Jason stepped forward, and I got my first good look at him outside the context of office parties. He was younger than me by at least 10 years, with the kind of soft handsomeness that came from never having worked with his hands. His expensive suit couldn't hide the uncomfortable way he shifted from foot to foot. "Look, man," he started, "maybe we can all just—" "Shut up," I said quietly. "You don't get to talk in my house." Michelle pushed past me into the living room, Jason trailing behind like a lost puppy. The officers followed, and suddenly my sanctuary felt invaded by strangers. "Ma'am," the older officer said, "you should know that bigamy is a serious criminal charge. We'll need to file a report." Michelle's confidence flickered for just a moment. "We were drunk. It doesn't count." "You texted your husband about it," the younger officer pointed out. I was joking around." Jason looked confused. "Wait, I thought we agreed that the marriage was real. That's why we came back together." "Just shut up, Jason," Michelle snapped, and I saw the first crack in their united front. The officers left after taking statements from all of us, promising to sort out the bigamy issue later. Michelle and Jason stood in my living room like they owned the place, which legally I supposed Michelle still did. "So what now?" I asked. "Now we figure this out like adults," Michelle said. "I'm filing for divorce Monday morning." "On what grounds? You're the one who committed adultery and bigamy." "The Vegas thing was a mistake. We'll get it annulled." Jason looked hurt. "I thought we talked about this. I thought we were going to make it work." "We are," Michelle said quickly, but her eyes were calculating. "I just meant, legally, it's easier to annul first and then remarry properly." I watched this exchange with growing fascination. Michelle was playing both sides, keeping her options open. Jason was too stupid to see it, but I wasn't. "Where are you planning to sleep?" I asked. "The guest room," Michelle said, "until we can work out a separation agreement." "And him?" "Jason is my friend. He can sleep on the couch." Jason's face fell. "But I thought—" "We'll talk about it later," Michelle cut him off. I looked at these two people who had blown up my life with a drunken Vegas wedding, now standing in my living room making plans like I wasn't even there. The cold feeling in my chest spread outward, numbing my fingertips. "Fine," I said, "but I want you both out by the end of the week." "You can't just kick us out," Michelle protested. "I have rights." "So do I. And Monday morning, I'm filing for divorce, citing bigamy and adultery. We'll let a judge decide who has what rights." That night, I lay in my bed listening to muffled arguments from the guest room. Michelle and Jason were learning that running away to Vegas was easier than dealing with the consequences. I stared at the ceiling and planned my next move. Monday morning came with the sound of Michelle's heels clicking across the hardwood floor as she prepared for work. She'd always been an early riser, up at 5:30 for her morning routine of coffee, news, and case preparation. Today felt different, though. The sounds were sharper, more deliberate, like she was putting on a performance. I found her in the kitchen, dressed in her best power suit, makeup perfectly applied. Jason sat at my breakfast table in yesterday's wrinkled clothes, looking like he'd slept badly on the couch. "Coffee's fresh," Michelle said without looking at me, her voice artificially bright. "I made extra." "How thoughtful." Jason cleared his throat. "Look, Jack, I know this is awkward for everyone. Maybe we should talk about how to handle things at the office." I poured myself coffee and studied him over the rim of my mug. "What's there to handle?" "Well, people are going to ask questions. About Vegas, about this situation. Let me guess. You want me to keep quiet so you don't look like the homewrecker you are." Michelle slammed her coffee cup down. "Nobody wrecked anything, Jack. Our marriage was over long before Vegas." "Funny, I didn't get that memo." "Oh, please. When's the last time we had a real conversation? When's the last time you showed any interest in my career, my life? When's the last time you came home before 8 p.m.? When's the last time you didn't spend the whole weekend working?" "I was building something. I made partner last year, in case you forgot. Not everyone can be content fixing cars their whole life." The words hung in the air like a slap. Jason shifted uncomfortably, probably realizing he was witnessing something deeper than a simple affair. "There it is," I said quietly. "The truth? You're embarrassed by me." "That's not—" "The grease under my fingernails. The fact that I didn't go to law school. The the way your fancy lawyer friends look at me like I'm the help. You're being ridiculous. Am I? How many times did you introduce me as my husband who owns a garage instead of just my husband? Michelle's face flushed. I was proud of your business. No, you were explaining me, like I was something that needed an excuse. Jason stood up abruptly. Maybe I should wait in the car. Sit down, I said, without taking my eyes off Michelle. You're part of this now. You might as well hear how it ends. It doesn't have to end badly, Michelle said, her lawyer voice kicking in. We can be civilized about this. Civilized. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean quiet. You want me to go away quietly so you can spin this however you want? I want us to act like adults. Adults don't run off to Vegas and marry their coworkers. We were drunk. You texted me about it. You were proud of it. Until you realized you'd have to face the consequences. Michelle grabbed her briefcase and headed for the door. I don't have time for this. We'll talk tonight. Will Jason be joining us for that conversation too? She stopped in the doorway. Jason and I are trying to figure out what we want. No, you're trying to figure out which option gives you the best outcome. You always were good at keeping your options open. After they left, I sat in the empty kitchen and called David Martinez. I need you to file the divorce papers today, I told him. Jack, are you sure you don't want to try mediation first? It might be less expensive. File them today. Bigamy, adultery, abandonment. I want her served at her office. That's going to be humiliating for her. Good. The next few days passed in a strange domestic limbo. Michelle and Jason came and went like they were playing house, but the tension was thick enough to cut. Michelle had moved into full damage control mode, spinning the story for anyone who would listen. According to her version, we'd been separated for months. The Vegas thing was just a drunken mistake, and I was being vindictive by making a big deal out of it. Jason, meanwhile, seemed to be having second thoughts. I caught him staring at me sometimes with something that might have been guilt or fear. He tried to apologize twice, but I'd shut him down both times. I wasn't interested in his remorse. Thursday evening, everything changed. I was in the garage working on a transmission rebuild when I heard voices from the house. Michelle was on the phone, and she was angry. I don't care what David says, she was telling someone. Jack is being completely unreasonable. He's trying to ruin my reputation. I moved closer to the door, connecting the garage to the house. No, Jason's being useless. He keeps talking about how we should do the right thing and confess everything. He doesn't understand what's at stake here. A pause. Of course I'm going to fight it. The bigamy charge is ridiculous. We were drunk, and it's going to be annulled anyway. As for the adultery, that's just his word against mine. Another pause, longer this time. Kelly, you know me better than that. I'm not going to let some grease monkey destroy everything I've worked for. I've got too much invested in this firm, in this life. Kelly, Michelle's best friend from college, now working in HR at the firm. I'd met her a few times at office parties, a sharp-eyed woman with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. The plan is simple, Michelle continued. Jason and I get the Vegas marriage annulled quietly. I file for divorce citing irreconcilable differences. Jack gets the house, I keep my practice and my reputation, clean and simple. What about Jason? Kelly's voice was faint through the phone, but I could just make it out. What about him? He served his purpose. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Look, Jason's sweet, but he's not partner material. He's a mid-level associate who got lucky. I needed someone to help me get out of my marriage without looking like the bad guy. Now that Jack's filed first, I can play the victim. You used him. I used the situation. Jason's a grown man who made his own choices. If he thought this was some grand romance, that's his problem. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. Michelle wasn't just cheating, she was manipulating everyone, including Jason. The Vegas wedding wasn't a drunken mistake or a moment of passion. It was calculated. But why Jason? And why now? I spent the rest of the evening thinking, and by morning I had a plan. Friday morning, I called in a favor from Tommy Coach Miller, who owned the boxing gym where I'd trained in my 20s. Tommy had connections throughout the city, cops, lawyers, private investigators, bail bondsmen. If you needed information or a quiet favor, Tommy was your man. I need someone to do a little digging, I told him over coffee at the gym's small cafe. Background check, financial records, that kind of thing. Tommy studied me with the same intensity he'd once used to analyze my footwork. This about Michelle? Her and her new boyfriend, and maybe her friend Kelly. You sure you want to go down this road, Jack? Sometimes it's better not to know. I already know she cheated. I want to know why. Tommy nodded slowly. I'll make some calls. The information came back Tuesday afternoon. Tommy handed me a manila folder thick with documents and photographs. "Your wife's been busy," he said. I opened the folder and started reading. Financial records, phone logs, credit reports, employment history. The story they told was fascinating. Michelle had been having an affair, all right, but not with Jason. The phone records showed months of calls and texts between Michelle and Kelly, at all hours of the day and night. Hotel receipts showed them sharing rooms during business trips. Credit card statements revealed expensive dinners, jewelry purchases, weekend getaways. Jason was the cover story. "Kelly's the real relationship," Tommy explained. "Has been for almost a year. Jason's just the beard, someone to make it look straight and respectable. But the Vegas marriage was Kelly's idea. Look at this." He pointed to a series of text messages between Kelly and Michelle, recovered from Michelle's cloud backup. "Kelly's been planning this for months. She wanted Michelle to leave you, but Michelle was worried about the optics. A lesbian affair might hurt her chances at the firm." I read the messages with growing amazement. Kelly had orchestrated everything. The Vegas trip, the marriage to Jason, even the timing of when Michelle would text me about it. "Make sure you tell Jack right away," one message read. "Don't give him time to think or plan. The shock will make him do something stupid, and then you can play victim." "There's more," Tommy said. "Kelly's got a history with you." He showed me employment records from 10 years ago. Kelly Monroe had applied for a receptionist job at my garage when I first opened. I'd turned her down. She was overqualified and would obviously leave as soon as something better came along. "She took it personally," Tommy said. "Started dating Michelle about 6 months later. Been whispering poison in her ear ever since." "This whole thing is revenge? For not hiring her as a receptionist?" "Some people hold grudges, and Kelly's the type who plays the long game." I spent the rest of the week studying the evidence and planning my response. Michelle and Jason were still living in my house, still playing their roles. Michelle had become increasingly confident as the days passed, convinced that her strategy was working. Jason seemed more miserable each day, like he was beginning to understand how he'd been used. Friday night, I made my move. I waited until Michelle and Jason were both home, then called them into the living room. "We need to talk," I said, setting the manila folder on the coffee table. Michelle's eyes flicked to the folder, but her expression remained calm. "What about?" "About Kelly." The color drained from Michelle's face. Jason looked confused. "Who's Kelly?" he asked. I opened the folder and spread out the photographs. Michelle and Kelly holding hands in restaurant booths, kissing in hotel lobbies, shopping together with the intimacy of lovers. "Kelly Monroe," I said. "Michelle's real partner." Jason stared at the photos like they were written in a foreign language. "I don't understand." "You were the cover story, Jason. The respectable male lover who would make Michelle's divorce look conventional." Michelle stood up abruptly. "Those photos are taken out of context." "Are they? What about these?" I spread out printouts of the text messages, the hotel receipts, the financial records. "What about the Vegas marriage? Kelly's idea, wasn't it? A way to shock me into doing something stupid so you could play victim." Jason was reading the text messages now, his face growing pale. You used me?" "Jason, it's not what it looks like. You never cared about me at all. This was all just, what, a game?" Michelle's composure was cracking. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The firm is conservative. If they knew about Kelly, so you destroyed my life instead," I said. "And his." Jason stood up, his hands shaking. "I quit my job for you. I moved out of my apartment. I thought we were building something together. We can still what? Keep pretending? Keep lying?" Jason looked at me with something like respect for the first time. "I'm sorry, Jack. I had no idea." He walked out of the house and didn't come back. Michelle sank back into her chair, her perfect facade finally crumbling. "You bastard! You've ruined everything. I've exposed everything. There's a difference." "What do you want?" I gathered up the papers and photos. "I want you out of my house. Tonight. You can't. Actually, I can. Fraud vitiates consent. Your entire divorce filing was based on lies. Jason was never your lover. Kelly was. You committed bigamy as part of a conspiracy to defraud me in divorce proceedings." Michelle's lawyer training kicked in. "You can't prove conspiracy." "Can't I?" I pulled out one more document, a recording device receipt from an electronics store. "I've been recording our conversations for the past week, including the one where you admitted to Kelly that Jason was just a useful idiot." The fight went out of her then. She looked smaller, older, like a balloon with the air let out. "I'll need a few days to find a place." "You can stay with Kelly. I'm sure she'll be happy to finally have you to herself. Michelle packed that night while I sat in the garage, listening to her move around upstairs. When she was done, she came to say goodbye. I did love you, Jack. In the beginning. I know, I said, but you loved the idea of yourself more. She left without another word. The divorce proceedings moved quickly once the truth came out. Michelle's law firm was not pleased to discover that one of their partners had committed bigamy as part of an elaborate deception. The criminal charges were dropped in exchange for Michelle's quiet resignation, but her legal career was effectively over. Jason, to his credit, came forward and testified about how he'd been manipulated. The Vegas marriage was annulled, and he moved back to his hometown in Ohio to start over. Kelly was the wild card. She'd been the mastermind behind everything, but she'd been careful not to leave any direct evidence of criminal wrongdoing. The firm couldn't fire her without proof of misconduct, so she kept her job and her benefits while Michelle lost everything. That should have been the end of it. Clean victory, complete vindication. I got the house, the business, and my reputation back. Michelle and Jason were out of my life forever, but Kelly wasn't done with me yet. It started small. Negative reviews of my garage appeared online, claiming I'd overcharged customers and done shoddy work. My business insurance was mysteriously canceled due to irregularities in my application. The health department showed up for a surprise inspection of my shop, citing anonymous complaints about environmental violations. Each incident was minor, easily explained away as coincidence or bad luck, but the pattern was clear. Kelly was waging a guerrilla war against my business and my reputation. The final straw came on a Thursday afternoon in late October. I was closing up the shop when Detective Mike Rourke, an old friend from high school, stopped by. Jack, we need to talk. What about? Kelly Monroe filed a harassment complaint against you. Says you've been following her, making threatening phone calls. That's ridiculous. I haven't had any contact with her since the divorce. I believe you, but I had to check it out. She's got phone records showing calls from your number. I pulled out my phone and showed him my call log. Mike, I haven't called anyone but customers and suppliers for weeks. He studied my phone, then nodded. Spoofed numbers. Someone's making calls that look like they're coming from your phone. Kelly. Can't prove it, but yeah, probably. She's been busy. Filed complaints with the Better Business Bureau, the State Licensing Board, even tried to get the IRS to audit you. Why won't she just let it go? Some people can't stand to lose, and you cost her everything she'd worked for. That night, I sat in my empty house and realized that Kelly would never stop. She'd keep chipping away at my life, my business, my reputation, until she destroyed everything I'd built. The legal system couldn't touch her. She was too smart, too careful, but I was done playing by the rules. I called Tommy Miller. I need to send a message, I told him. What kind of message? The kind that makes someone decide to move to another city. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. You sure about this, Jack? Once you cross that line, there's no going back. She crossed it first. I'm just returning the favor. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Kelly's weakness was her pride. She couldn't resist showing off, being the smartest person in the room. We'd give her a chance to gloat, and then we'd destroy her. Tommy arranged for Kelly to receive an anonymous tip that I was planning to flee the country with stolen money from my business. The tip included details about a storage unit where I'd allegedly hidden cash and documents. Kelly took the bait. She called the police and the FBI, claiming I was about to skip town. She even showed up at the storage facility with a news crew, ready to watch my dramatic arrest. Instead, she found an empty storage unit and a manila envelope with her name on it. Inside the envelope was every piece of evidence we'd gathered about her affair with Michelle, her conspiracy to destroy my marriage, and her ongoing harassment campaign. But more importantly, it contained evidence of her embezzlement from the law firm. Tommy's investigator had been thorough. Kelly had been skimming money from the firm's client accounts for years, covering her tracks with false billing and creative accounting. She'd used the money to finance her lifestyle and her relationship with Michelle. The FBI is very interested in financial crimes, Tommy told me later, especially when they involve law firms and client funds. Kelly was arrested the following Monday. The news coverage was extensive. A respected HR executive at a prestigious law firm, caught embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars. Her mugshot was on the front page of the local newspaper. She tried to plea bargain by offering information about other crimes, but there was nothing to trade. Michelle had already lost everything, Jason was long gone, and I had been the victim, not the perpetrator. Kelly got 5 years in federal prison. 6 months later, I was rebuilding my life piece by piece. The garage was busier than ever. Apparently, surviving a public scandal made people trust you more, not less. I'd hired 2 new mechanics and was considering opening a second location. Michelle had moved to another state and was working as a paralegal under her maiden name. We had no contact, which suited me fine. Jason had sent me a letter apologizing again and thanking me for exposing the truth. He was engaged to a kindergarten teacher and seemed happy. Kelly was serving her sentence at a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. I'd heard through Tommy that she was teaching other inmates how to file legal briefs and appeals. Even in prison, she couldn't resist being the smartest person in the room. I should have felt satisfied. Justice had been served, my enemies were defeated, and my life was better than it had been in years. But something was still bothering me. It took me a while to figure out what it was. The truth was, I'd enjoyed it. The investigation, the planning, the careful destruction of my enemies, it had been the most alive I'd felt in years. For the first time since high school, I'd been playing to win instead of just trying not to lose. Michelle had been right about one thing. I had been content to fix cars and live small. I'd let myself become invisible, forgettable. But the man who'd taken down Kelly Monroe and exposed Michelle's conspiracy, that man was someone to be reckoned with. I started looking for new challenges. Bigger risks, higher stakes. The garage was profitable, but it was small time. I had skills now that I'd never known I possessed. The ability to read people, to plan complex operations, to stay calm under pressure. Tommy noticed the change first. "You're different, Jack. Harder." Is that bad? Depends on what you do with it. I was still thinking about that conversation when I got the call from Detective Rourke. "Jack, I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" "The kind where you help me catch some very bad people." He explained the situation over coffee at the diner downtown. A group of white-collar criminals was running an elaborate insurance fraud scheme, bilking elderly victims out of their life savings. The FBI had been investigating for months, but they couldn't get close enough to gather evidence. "We need someone who can go undercover," Mike said. "Someone with a legitimate business, a clean record, and the skills to handle himself if things go bad." "Why me?" "Because you just spent 6 months playing chess with some very smart, very dangerous people, and you won." I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. "What do you need me to do?" The operation took 3 months to set up and 2 weeks to execute. I played the role of a corrupt garage owner willing to help the criminals launder money through fake auto repairs. I wore a wire, gathered evidence, and helped the FBI build an airtight case against 12 people. When the arrests went down, I was there to watch. The satisfaction was even better than destroying Kelly. Mike offered me a job as a consultant, working with law enforcement on complex fraud cases. The pay was good, the work was challenging, and it let me use the skills I'd discovered during my divorce. I accepted immediately. The irony wasn't lost on me. Michelle's betrayal had been meant to destroy me, but instead, it had revealed who I really was underneath the grease and the small-town contentment. I wasn't just Jack Forrester, the mechanic who fixed cars and minded his own business. I was Jack Forrester, the man who could outthink lawyers and criminals, who could plan complex operations and execute them flawlessly, who could look at a seemingly impossible situation and find a way to win. 3 years later, I was running my own private investigation firm, specializing in corporate fraud and domestic cases. The garage was still operating, managed by my former employees, but it was just one part of a growing business empire. I'd helped dozens of clients expose cheating spouses, embezzling employees, and corrupt business partners. Each case was a puzzle to solve, a game to win, and I was very good at winning. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if Michelle had never sent that text from Vegas. Would I have lived my whole life fixing cars and never knowing what I was capable of? Probably. But she did send the text. She did try to destroy me. And in doing so, she'd created something far more dangerous than the simple mechanic she'd married. She'd created a man who knew exactly how much damage he could do when properly motivated. The last I heard, Michelle was working as a legal secretary in Phoenix, living in a studio apartment, and driving a 10-year-old Honda. Kelly would be eligible for parole in 2 years, but her law license was permanently revoked and she'd never work in the legal field again. Jason was doing well. He'd married his kindergarten teacher and they had a baby on the way. He'd sent me a wedding invitation, which I thought was classy. As for me, I was exactly where I belonged. In the shadows, pulling strings, solving puzzles that other people couldn't solve. Michelle had wanted me to be